I moved to that little house on the ridge outside Boone in the spring of 2009 because I was tired of people. Tired of the city, tired of noise, tired of faces that expected something from me every damn day. The realtor called it a fixer-upper with character. It was a 2-room clapboard box built in 1938, paint the color of creek mud, sitting on a half-acre of red clay in kudzu. The only neighbor within hollering distance was an old man who lived in the identical house next door, separated from mine by nothing but a strip of crabgrass and a rusted hog-wire fence. She said his name was Mr. Caudle and that he kept to himself. That sounded perfect. First time I saw him, I was unloading boxes from the truck. He was already on his porch, dead centered in a cane-bottom rocker that looked older than sin. Gray hair slicked back, overalls washed so many times they'd gone white, hands folded in his lap like he was waiting on a bus that never came. I raised a hand in greeting. He didn't wave back. He just lifted the index finger of his right hand about an inch off the armrest, slow like it hurt, and let it drop again. His eyes never left the mountain across the road. I noticed then that he didn't seem to blink. I figured age, cataracts, whatever. Old men get strange. The first couple weeks were everything I wanted. No sirens, no neighbors banging on walls, just wind in the pines and the occasional dog barking miles away. I'd sit on my own porch in the evenings with a beer and listen to the quiet settle. Mr. Caudle was always there, same chair, same position, dawn to dark, rain or shine. Sometimes I'd catch myself staring, trying to catch the moment his lids would drop. They never did, not once. After a while, it started to feel rude, like I was waiting for him to die or something, so I quit looking. Summer came on hot and thick. I worked odd jobs, hauling scrap, patching roofs, and spent most nights too tired to do anything but eat a bowl of soup and fall into bed. The houses shared a common attic. You could see the single ridge line from the road. I never thought much about it until one night in late July when the heat finally broke and a storm rolled down off Grandfather Mountain. Thunder cracked so hard the windows rattled. I was lying there half asleep when I heard it. 3 knocks inside the wall behind my headboard. Slow, deliberate. Knock, knock, knock. Then silence long enough for me to wonder if I dreamed it. Then 3 more. Same rhythm, same spot. I sat up, heart already going. The wall was plaster and lath, cool to the touch. I pressed my ear against it and waited. Nothing. Told myself it was the house settling, a branch hitting the tin roof, or the storm playing tricks. Went back to bed. An hour later, knock, knock, knock. I got a flashlight and went outside in my boxers, rain soaking me in seconds. Walked the perimeter shining the beam up at the eaves. No branches, no loose tin, nothing. Knocking had stopped the minute I stepped off the porch. Next morning I called my cousin Dale, who does carpentry. Told him I thought I had squirrels in the attic. He came over that afternoon with his tool bag, grumbling about city folks hearing things. We pulled down the little scuttle door in the hallway ceiling. Things so small you had to go up backwards on your knees. Dust and cobwebs thick as curtains. Dale shone his headlamp around and whistled low. Ain't no squirrels been up here in years, he said, but somebody has. There were footprints in the dust, bare feet, long and narrow, leading from the far gable straight across the boards to the low knee wall that separated my side of the attic from Mr. Caudle's. A perfect straight line, like the walker never once looked left or right. We followed them. The knee wall had a plank missing, just wide enough for a man to squeeze through sideways. On the other side, the footprints kept going, disappearing into the dark on Caudle's half. Dale wanted to keep going, but something in me went cold. I told him we'd board it up and be done with it. He gave me a look, but didn't argue. We nailed a sheet of plywood over the hole, dragged an old trunk in front of the scuttle, and that was that. Or so I thought. 2 nights later, the knocking came again, louder, closer, like it was right above my bed now. I laid there frozen, counting, 3 and 3 over and over until the storm passed and the crickets took over again. I didn't sleep. At first light, I was back in the attic with a crowbar. Ripped that plywood off like it burned me. The footprints were fresh, dust pushed aside in perfect outline. And this time they came all the way to my side, stopped right above where my pillow would be, then turned around and walked back. That's when I saw the camera. It was a little Kodak disposable, the kind you used to get developed at the drugstore, wedged between two rafters with the lens pointed straight down through a hole somebody had bored in my bedroom ceiling. A perfect view of the bed. The hole had been patched with plaster and painted over so many times you'd never notice unless you were looking for it. I pried the camera loose with shaking hands. 27 exposures, all used. I took it to the Walmart in Boone that still had a photo machine, waited the hour with my stomach in knots. Every single picture was of me. Me asleep on my back, mouth open, me rolling over, me sitting on the edge of the bed pulling on socks, a couple through the bathroom window while I showered, steam fogging the lens. The last 6 were from the same night I heard the knocking. Time stamped 2:14, 2:37, 2:51. In one of them, my eyes are open, staring straight up at the ceiling. I don't remember waking up. On the back of every photo, written in pencil with a shaking hand, "He blinks when you do." I drove straight home doing 90 on the curves, tires squealing. Mr. Carter was in his rocker, same as always. I stormed across the yard waving the stack of pictures and screaming every curse word I knew. Asked him what kind of sick old bastard spies on people sleeping. He didn't flinch, didn't speak, just lifted that one finger off the armrest again, real slow, and pointed at his own eyes, wide, dry, and ancient. Then he smiled for the first time I'd ever seen. Not a nice smile, the kind that says, "I've been waiting on you to figure it out." I called the sheriff. 2 deputies came out, took my statement, went next door. Knocked, no answer. Door was unlocked, they went in. I stood on my porch watching, arms wrapped around myself, even though it was August hot. 10 minutes later, one of them came back white as a sheet and asked if I was sure the old man had been sitting there all morning. I said yeah, hadn't moved an inch. Deputy said the house was empty. No furniture, no food, no clothes. Just a single rocking chair in the living room facing a blank wall, and in the attic, a crawl space full of cameras, dozens of them, all pointed at my side of the roofline. Some still had film. One still had a red light blinking. They searched the woods, the creek banks, every outbuilding for miles. Never found hide nor hair of Mr. Carter. Case went cold in a week. Folks in town started crossing the street when they saw me coming. Said I'd brought something back with me from that ridge. I moved out that same night, left everything, clothes, furniture, the truck title on the table. Drove to Charlotte and never went back. But every time I close my eyes too long, I feel it. That pressure like someone staring from real close. Sometimes in the dark, I swear I hear that rocker creaking, slow and steady, right outside whatever window I'm sleeping under. And I fight like hell to keep from blinking because I still ain't sure who's doing it for who anymore. Last I heard, both houses are still empty. Realtor can't get them away. But if you ride up there on a quiet evening, folks say you can see an old man on one of the porches, just sitting, waiting, eyes wide open, and he don't blink until you do. We grew up calling it the Devil's Ear Holler, that long, narrow crease in the mountain just outside Harlan, where the sun only hit the porch for about 20 minutes every afternoon. Houses were scattered far enough apart that you could holler and maybe get an answer, maybe not. My Aunt Loretta raised me and my cousin Ray in the same little place after our folks passed in a wreck on 421. Ray was 2 years older, big through the shoulders, quiet in a way that made people trust him. He could fix anything with an engine and still had time to sit on the porch picking Man of Constant Sorrow on a guitar older than both of us. Everybody loved Ray. Everybody knew Ray. That's why it hurt so bad when he forgot who he was. Miss Eula lived 3 switchbacks up the dirt track in a house that used to be white once. She was old even when I was little, skin like wet newspaper, hair the color of iron filings, always wearing the same faded calico dress and men's brogans 2 sizes too big. Folks said she was a granny woman back before the clinics came, knew roots and signs and how to talk a wart off your hand. Mostly she kept to herself, but every few months she'd come tapping at doors with a mason jar in her hands, sweet as you please, asking to borrow a cup of sugar or a cup of your name for a spell. We laughed it off, mountain talk, just Miss Eula being Miss Eula. I was working second shift at the parts store in town when it started getting strange. First, it was old Mrs. Cornett down the road. She woke up one morning and couldn't remember her Christian name. Called herself Hey You for 2 days, then just stopped talking altogether. Week later, Junior Sloan, big loud boy who drove a log truck, forgot his own last name. Sat on his porch staring at his CDL like it belonged to a stranger. People started locking doors when Miss Eula came around. Ray told her no the polite way the first time she asked him. She just smiled, teeth brown as walnut hulls, and said, "That's all right, honey, some other time." It rained the day she came back. Not a polite rain, the kind that turns the creek the color of coffee and makes the dogs hide under the house. I was in town until 9. Ray had the evening off, said he was going to work on Aunt Loretta's old Ford. When I got home, the porch light was on, truck in the yard, but the house was dark inside. I found Ray standing in the kitchen, soaked to the bone, staring at the wall like he'd never seen paneling before. Water dripped off him onto the linoleum. I asked what was wrong, and he turned slow, eyes wide and empty. "Who am I talking to right now?" he said, voice flat like reading off a card. "Who are you?" I laughed at first, thought he was pulling my leg, told him to quit fooling. He just kept asking, softer each time, until it sounded like begging. I got him dried off, put him to bed with a quilt pulled up to his chin like when we were kids. Next morning he was worse. Couldn't remember our aunt's name, couldn't remember mine, couldn't remember his own. When I said Ray, he looked at me like I was speaking German. Aunt Loretta cried so hard she had to go stay with her sister in Cumberland. By the second night he wouldn't stay inside. Kept walking to the screen door, pressing his hands against it, staring up the holler toward Miss Eula's place. I'd pull him back, lock the door, and 10 minutes later he'd be there again, palms flat on the mesh, whispering something I couldn't catch. Around 3 in the morning, the whispering stopped. I found the door standing open and the yard empty, rain still pouring. I grabbed a flashlight and took off after him. The mud was ankle deep, sucking at my boots. I followed his tracks as far as the footbridge over the creek, then lost him where the water ran across the road. Called until my throat bled. Nothing came back but the rain. At daylight, I called the sheriff. They organized search parties, state police, fire department, dogs, volunteers. Found pieces of his driver's license scattered along the ridge trail like somebody had stood in one spot and tore it to confetti. Little green flakes caught on laurel leaves, spelling out Raymond Allen Cole in shredded plastic. Wallet was empty except for a single photograph of me and him at ages 10 and 12, arms slung around each other, grinning like fools. On the back, in handwriting I didn't recognize, somebody had written, "Borrowed. Thank you." We never found him. Dogs lost a scent at the creek like he walked into the water and kept going. After a month, the searches got smaller, then stopped. Aunt Loretta went into a home over in Whitesburg. She couldn't stand the sight of our house anymore. I stayed on because somebody had to feed the dogs and keep the pipes from freezing. Miss Eula's place was dark every night. Then one morning her old Plymouth was gone and the house sat empty, windows busted out by kids with rocks. I thought that was the end of it. Years went by. I got married, got divorced, moved into town, tried to forget the sound of my cousin asking who he was. But every time I drive back through the holler to visit Aunt Loretta's grave, I slow down past Miss Eula's place. Grass grows tall around the steps now, porch sagging like it's tired. Sometimes, if the wind is coming down off Pine Mountain just right, I swear I can hear her voice drifting along the creek banks, soft and sweet as ever. "Can I borrow yours just for a minute, hon? I promise I'll give it back." I keep my windows rolled up and my name locked tight behind my teeth because I still wake up some nights with my mouth open like I'm about to answer her, and for a second, just a second, I can't remember what I'm called. I bought the little brick ranch on Maple Street in Grundy because it was the only house in town I could afford on a lineman's paycheck, and because the realtor swore the street was quiet. She wasn't wrong about that part. Most nights you could hear a cough carried 3 houses down. Directly across from me stood a 2-story Victorian that had been empty since I was in high school. Paint gone gray, gutters hanging like loose teeth, every window boarded up with plywood gone soft from the rain. Folks said the bank took it after the old couple died. No kids, no will, and nobody wanted to mess with the paperwork. Grass grew knee-high, then waist-high. Kids called it the dead house and dared each other to touch the mailbox. I never paid it much mind. Dead houses are just part of the scenery in Buchanan County. It was late October 2021 when the lights came on. I just worked a 16-hour storm call up near Richlands, limbs down across lines, whole holler dark. Pulled in about 2:30 in the morning, bone tired, smelling of diesel and wet leaves. Killed the truck and sat there a minute letting the quiet settle. That's when I noticed the glow. Every single window in that old house was lit up bright white. No orange, no yellow, just cold, pure white like someone had poured milk in there and turned it on. No flicker, no shadows from bulbs, no nothing. Just light, steady, and wrong. I rubbed my eyes, figured I was seeing things from exhaustion, but the light stayed. I could see the shapes of the window frames perfectly, edges sharp as knives. Then the silhouettes appeared. 1 in every window. Not blurry, not moving. 12 of them. I counted twice. Tall ones downstairs, shorter ones up. All facing straight ahead. Facing me. I was maybe 60 feet away sitting in my truck, and I swear I felt the weight of their attention like someone laid a hand on the back of my neck. I don't scare easy. Been up poles and lightning, worked wrecks where the power's still dancing, but something about those shapes made my skin crawl. I grabbed my phone to take a picture. The second I raised it, every light snapped off at once. House went blacker than black, like it swallowed the glow. I sat there another 5 minutes waiting for my heart to slow down, then went inside and locked the door behind me like a kid. Next morning, the house looked exactly the way it always had. Boards warped, vines choking the porch, no sign anything had happened. I walked over after coffee, boots crunching in the frost. Peered through a crack between the plywood and the frame. Smelled mold and mouse nests, nothing else. Told myself it was squatters with a generator and some LED panels. Happens sometimes. Told myself that all day. Second night, I was ready. Got home at a decent hour, ate chili out of the pot, kept every light in my place off so I could watch. 11:47 on the dot. The glow came back. Same pure white, same stillness. Then the silhouettes stepped into place, one by one, like they were waiting for the exact second. 12 again. I wrote the time in my phone. They didn't move, didn't sway, didn't breathe as far as I could tell. Just stood there staring across the street at my dark windows. I sat on the couch with the blinds cracked, barely breathing myself. At 2:13, the lights cut out. I checked the clock, same minute as the night before. Third night, I called in sick, told the foreman I had a stomach thing. Sat in the recliner with a thermos of coffee and a pair of binoculars I use for hunting. No lights in my house, curtains open just enough. 11:47, glow. 11:52, silhouettes. Same count. I raised the binocular slow, heart hammering so loud I was scared they'd hear it across the road. Got the downstairs windows in focus first. The figures were clearer this close. Men in suits, women in dresses, all old-fashioned clothes like from the 50s. Faces smooth, no features, just blank oval heads. I moved up to the second floor. That's when I saw the little girl in the corner room on the left. Smaller than the rest, hair in 2 ponytails, wearing what looked like a nightgown. She was the only one whose head was turned slightly, like she was looking for something. I don't know what made me do it. I lifted my right hand a couple inches off the armrest, just testing. Every single figure raised their right arm at the exact same time. Same height, same speed. My stomach dropped so hard I almost threw up the coffee. I lowered my arm. They lowered theirs. I did it again, slower. They copied. I stood up without thinking. 12 silhouettes stood straighter. I took 1 step back. They took 1 step forward, pressing against the glass. The little girl raised both arms like she wanted picked up. I dropped the binoculars, yanked the curtain shut, and ran through the house checking every lock twice. Stood in the kitchen with all the lights blazing, hands shaking so bad I couldn't dial 911. Finally got through. Told the dispatcher somebody was in the house across the street mimicking me. She said she'd send a unit. I opened the curtains again. Every light was out except the upstairs corner room. Just that one window glowing soft. The little girl stood there alone, palm pressed to the glass. Then she waved, slow, side to side, like she knew me, like she was saying good night. Police came, 2 cars. They kicked the front door, no warrant needed on an abandoned property, and went in with flashlights and guns drawn. I watched from my porch in the cold. Took 'em 20 minutes to clear it. When the taller officer came over, he looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Ain't nobody in there," he said. "No wiring, no generator, no footprints in the dust. Place is sealed up tight as a tomb." He hesitated. "But every window on the front of the house has a perfect handprint on the inside of the glass. Small ones upstairs, like kids been pressing their palms there a long time. Dust is thick everywhere else." They left. I didn't sleep. Packed a bag at dawn and drove to my sister's in Richlands for a week. Told myself I was done with the house, done with Grundy, done with all of it. But rent was paid through the month, and the power company don't let you miss shifts forever. Came back on a Sunday night, steeling myself the whole drive. Maple Street was quiet. The dead house was dark. I left the porch light off, went straight inside, locked up, poured a drink. Sat in the living room staring at the curtains. Told myself it was over. Told myself that a lot. At 11:47, my living room lamp came on. Not flickered, not surged, just on. Full brightness. I froze. Every lamp in the house followed, one after another, like someone walking through flipping switches. Then the overheads, then the stove light in the kitchen. I stood up slow, glass falling from my hand. The curtains were open. Every window across the street was glowing again brighter than ever. The silhouettes were already there, 12 of them. And in my own windows, reflected behind me in the glass, 12 more shapes stood perfectly still. I live in Knoxville now. New job, new apartment on the 10th floor, city lights so bright you can't see stars. I still keep every curtain closed after dark. Sometimes when the room is real quiet, I catch myself counting. 1, 2, 3, up to 12. And I swear on the other side of those curtains, something is counting with me. I was born and raised just a mile or so from where the road quits being gravel and turns into 2 ruts up Sinking Creek outside Clintwood. Everybody knew Mrs. Dodson. She'd been wearing widow's black since the spring of '87 when Mr. Leonard went out to plow the upper field and never came back down the ridge. Found him 3 days later wedged under the overturned tractor, already gone. After the funeral, she just kept the black dresses on, said color felt disrespectful. Folks understood. She was the kind of woman who showed up with a pound cake when somebody died and a pot of soup when somebody was born. Always smelled like cinnamon and wood smoke, always had a kind word. Even when her hands started shaking and her eyes went a little cloudy, she still baked. I was 15 the winter everything changed. It was a hard one, cold that got down into your bones and stayed there. Snow came early and piled so deep the mail truck quit trying. My daddy plowed what roads he could with the county blade, and Mama kept the wood stove fed. We noticed the smell first when we drove past the Dotson place on the way to town. At first it was just a whiff, like somebody left a deer carcass too close to the house. Then it got thicker, sour, wrong. Mama rolled her window up, even though the heater barely worked. "Something died over there," she said. Daddy just nodded and kept driving. Mrs. Dotson missed church 2 Sundays in a row. That wasn't like her. On the 3rd Sunday, the preacher asked if anybody had checked on her. Nobody had. Folks get funny about old widows. Nobody wants to be the one who finds them cold in bed. Finally, my daddy and Uncle Reese pulled on coveralls and walked the half-mile through the snow. I trailed behind because I was nosy and 15 and thought I was invincible. The smell hit us 50 yards from the porch, wet rot and something coppery underneath. Daddy told me to stay outside. I didn't listen. The front door was unlocked, like always. Inside it was warm, too warm, the way a house feels when the stove's been running day and night. First thing I noticed was the table set for 2. Flowered plates, cloth napkins folded neat, 2 cups of coffee gone cold and skinned over. Second thing was Mrs. Dotson sitting there in her black dress, hair pinned up perfect, hands folded like she was waiting on company. She smiled when she saw Daddy. "Afternoon, Harold. You're just in time. Leonard's late again." Daddy stopped dead in the doorway. Uncle Reese made a sound like somebody stepped on his foot. I looked past them and saw what they saw. There was a man sitting across from her, tall the way Mr. Leonard had been, same broad shoulders. He wore Leonard's old Sunday suit, the charcoal one they buried him in. The jacket hung loose now, sleeves too long, cuffs stained dark. His head was bowed, chin on his chest. The skin of his hands and neck had gone black and papery, split in places, shiny with something wet. A smell rolled off him so strong my eyes watered. Daddy took 1 step inside and the floorboards creaked. The thing in the suit lifted its head real slow. It wasn't Mr. Leonard anymore. Couldn't be. The face had sunk until the cheekbones stuck out like shelf rock. Lips shrunk back from teeth too big and too yellow. Eyes were gone, just dark pockets with something moving slow in the bottom like tadpoles in a spring. But it turned toward Daddy's voice like it recognized him. Mrs. Dotson reached over and patted the thing's hand. The skin slid when she touched it, like a glove a size too big. "Now, Leonard, don't be rude. Say hello to Harold and Reese." The mouth opened. Air came out that smelled like a grave in July. It made a sound, wet, thick, trying to shape words it didn't have the parts for anymore. Mrs. Dotson nodded like it made perfect sense. "He says he's glad y'all stopped by. Been powerful lonesome." Daddy backed up so fast he hit the door frame. Uncle Reese was already in the yard gagging into the snow. I couldn't move. Mrs. Dotson looked straight at me then, eyes clear as creek ice. "You tell your mama I'll bring her a chess pie as soon as the roads open up." That night, Daddy called the sheriff from the payphone at the store because our line was down from ice. Took them 2 days to get a 4-wheel drive up the creek. By then, the smell had soaked into everything, curtains, floorboards, the snow around the house. They found Mrs. Dotson still at the table, still smiling, still waiting. Leonard, what was left of him, sat across from her. Sometime in those 2 days, she'd propped him better, tucked a napkin into his collar like he might spill. There was a plate of cookies between them, gone soft and green. Sheriff said later the cellar door had been nailed shut from the inside. Took 3 men and a crowbar to get it open. Steps went down into black so thick their flashlights hardly cut it. At the bottom they found the coffin.
empty, lid pried off and splintered. Dirt floor was scratched up like something big had dug its way out. Handprints on the underside of the door. Long fingers, nails broke off and caked black. They carried Mrs. Dotson out wrapped in a blanket. She never once stopped talking to Leonard, telling him to mind his manners and not scare the officers. They took her to the state hospital over in Big Stone Gap. She died quiet a month later, still asking for Leonard to come sit with her. The thing in the suit wouldn't stay on the stretcher, kept trying to sit up, reaching for where she'd been. They ended up burning it in the yard with diesel and prayer. Then they burned the house, watched it go until the flames turned blue and the smoke hung low like it didn't want to leave. I drive past the spot sometimes when I go home to see Mama. Nothing there now but chimney stones and a patch of ground where nothing grows, not even dandelions. Snow melts off at first every winter, and frost don't stick. On real still nights when the creek's frozen and the dogs won't bark, folks say you can smell cinnamon just for a second. Then the rot rolls in behind it. And if you listen close, real close, you might hear an old woman's voice drifting up from that cellar that ain't there anymore. "Leonard, I told you supper's ready. Come on up now, honey. It's getting cold."
The old Victorian on College Street in Whitesburg had been empty so long the wisteria had eaten half the porch. Folks said the bank owned it, or the county, or maybe the ghosts. Nobody was ever real clear. It sat at the dead end where the road turns to gravel and the mountain leans in close, so close you can smell pine pitch through the screens in summer. I lived in a little white house directly across, close enough to see every cracked window and every sag in the roof. I'd been there since my divorce, just me and a mutt named Junebug who barked at everything and nothing. In March of 2018, a plain white van backed up to the gate and a family moved in overnight. No moving trucks, no hellos, no casseroles left on the step the way people usually do. Just 5 pale figures in dark clothes carrying boxes and mattresses like they'd done it 100 times before. Father, tall and thin, mother, smaller with hair the color of creek water, 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, all stair-stepped and quiet as shadows. They never made a sound you could call loud. Even when the kids played in the yard, it was a strange, silent game, running without shouting, laughing without noise, mouths open but nothing coming out except the softest breath. I told myself some folks raise their young that way. Still, Junebug growled low in her throat every time they stepped outside. I met the mother once. She was hanging wash on a line strung between 2 locust trees, sheets so white they hurt to look at in the sun. I walked over with a jar of blackberry jam like my mama taught me. She turned when my shoes crunched the gravel, smiled the kind of smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes, and took the jam with both hands. When she said thank you, it was barely air, like the words were too heavy to lift. I asked her name. She tilted her head, listened to something I couldn't hear, then leaned close enough I smelled soap and cold iron. "We don't use them much," she breathed. "Names draw things." I laughed, awkward, and went home. That night, Junebug stood at the screen door and whined until I let her out. She peed once and bolted straight across the street, barking like fire was on her tail. Lights came on in the Victorian, soft, yellow, old-fashioned bulbs, and the father stepped onto the porch. He didn't yell at the dog. He just looked at her, head cocked the same way his wife had done, and Junebug tucked tail and ran back to me shaking. After that, she slept on the foot of my bed every night, pressed against my legs like she was cold. Summer came on thick and green. The family kept to themselves, but you'd see them sometimes at dusk walking the edge of the yard in a perfect line. Father first, then mother, then the children holding hands. Always barefoot, always whispering. I'd sit on my porch with a glass of tea and strain to hear what they were saying. It wasn't English, wasn't any language I knew, just a low susurrus like wind moving through dead leaves long after the tree is gone. The sound crawled under my skin and stayed there. The night it changed was late August, the kind of hot where the air sticks to you. I'd left the bedroom window cracked because the AC unit coughed itself to death earlier that week. Woke up around 3 to the feeling that something was listening to me breathe. The room was dark except for the streetlight bleeding through the curtains, but I could hear them, that same whispering cadence, soft, steady, close. Not inside the house yet, but right outside the screen. I laid there frozen, telling myself it was a dream, telling myself to roll over and ignore it. The rhythm never changed, never hurried, just a gentle back and forth like a lullaby in a throat that didn't need air. I made myself sit up. The whispering stopped clean, like someone cut a wire. Moonlight painted the yard silver. They were all 5 standing in a half circle around my bedroom window, nightgowns hanging loose, heads tilted at the exact same angle. Faces pale, eyes wide open, mouths moving in perfect unison. The children were in front, barefoot in the dew-wet grass, hair plastered to their skulls with sweat or something else. I could see their breath in the cool night air, even though it was 80 degrees. They weren't looking at the window. They were looking through it. I lunged for the lamp. The second light hit the glass, they scattered. No running, no stumbling, just gone, like someone yanked them backward on strings. I heard the soft pad of feet across my porch, across the street, then nothing. Junebug was under the bed, growling so deep her whole body shook. I turned on every light in the house, checked every lock twice, sat up the rest of the night with the shotgun across my knees. At dawn, I walked the yard with a flashlight. 5 sets of bare footprints came right up to the window, stopped an inch from the wall, then turned and left the same way. Grass was pressed flat in perfect outlines, like they'd stood there a long time. Next morning, I took a thermos of coffee and waited on the porch swing. The mother came out around 9 to sweep the steps. Acted like any other Saturday. I called across the street, asked if everything was all right, if maybe the kids had been sleepwalking. She paused mid-sweep, smiled that same empty smile, and said, "They just wanted to see if you were lonely." Then she went back inside. The broom never made a sound against the wood. A week later, the house was empty again. No van, no goodbyes, just gone. For sale sign went up the same day, fresh paint, phone number bright and bold. I walked through with the realtor out of curiosity. Place smelled like it had never been lived in. No food smells, no soap, no trace of people. Upstairs in the little back bedroom, the windows were covered in tiny handprints on the inside of the glass, too high for any child to reach without standing on something. Dust was thick everywhere else, but those prints were clean, like they'd been made yesterday. The new owners moved in right before Christmas, young couple from Lexington with a baby on the way. Nice folks. I took them a ham and some cornbread the way my mama would have wanted. They lasted 4 months. Left in the middle of the night, same way the Whisper family came. Only thing they took was the baby and the clothes on their backs. Realtor said they wouldn't talk about why, just kept saying the house already had children. I still live across the street. Victorian's empty again, boards coming back over the windows one by one. Some nights when the wind is still, I crack my bedroom window just to listen. Junebug's been gone a year now. Old age took her peaceful, but I swear I can feel her pressed against my legs when the whispering starts. It's always the same rhythm, soft and patient, drifting across the street like smoke. Sometimes it's outside the window. Sometimes it's inside the room, so close I feel it on my face. Sometimes it's under the bed or behind the headboard or right beside my ear when I wake up gasping. I still haven't heard a single word I understand, but every night it sounds a little more like they're learning mine.
The coal camp outside Pikeville was called Mud Lick when it still had a post office. But by the time I was growing up in the late 80s, it was just a row of Sag and Company houses leaning against the mountain like tired old men. Most of the mines had shut down years before, and the ones that still ran only worked a handful of men on short shifts. Folks left when they could, and the ones who stayed did it because they didn't have any place else to go. I was 12 in the summer of '94, living with my mama in the last house on the upper row, the one with the tin roof that sounded like gunfire when it rained. Old man Gurney lived alone in the house directly below ours, the only one with a chain-link fence still standing. He'd worked the tipple back when the train still hauled coal out every day, lost most of his hearing to the shaker screens, and retired when the company doctor told him his lungs were half gravel. After that, he kept to himself, tended a little garden of tomatoes and pole beans, sat on his porch in the evenings rocking slow. He always waved when you passed, big friendly sweep of his hand, fingers spread wide. Everybody said Mr. Gurney was harmless, just a lonely old widower who missed his wife. That spring, he started wearing gloves. First, it was just work gloves, the kind with the yellow backs, even when he wasn't gardening. Then it was brown leather dress gloves, shiny at the knuckles, the kind you'd wear to church if you still went. By June, he had on black knit gloves in 90-degree heat, the kind women wear when the hands get stiff. People noticed, but mountain people mind their own business unless somebody's bleeding in the road. Kids started saying he'd cut his fingers off in some accident and was ashamed to show the stubs. We dared each other to run past his fence after dark, yelling, "Show us your hands, Mr. Gurney." He'd just sit there rocking, lifting one gloved hand in that same slow wave, smiling like he was proud we'd come visit. My best friend that summer was Tommy Pratt. He was 10, small for his age, all elbows and freckles, raised by his older sister after their daddy got killed in a roof fall over in Virgie. Tommy was the kind of boy who'd take any dare if you called him chicken. One night in July, a bunch of us were playing kick-the-can down by the old commissary. Somebody, I can't remember who, said they'd give Tommy a whole $1 if he'd sneak up to Gurney's kitchen window and look in. $1 was a fortune. Tommy took the dare. He waited till the streetlights buzzed on, then slipped off into the dark. We lost sight of him almost right away. 10 minutes went by, then 20. We started getting nervous, whispering that maybe we ought to go after him. Just when we were fixing to, Tommy came tearing back up the road, barefoot, shirt half torn off, eyes so wide you could see white all the way around. He ran straight past us without stopping, straight to his sister's porch and inside. Wouldn't come out, wouldn't talk. Next morning, he was gone. Sister said he packed a grocery sack with 2 changes of clothes and walked off down the tracks before sunrise. Nobody saw him for 3 days. They found him on the 3rd afternoon, sitting on the railroad ties near the mouth of Mud Lick Tunnel, rocking back and forth, covered in coal dust and dried blood. Both pinky fingers were gone, cut clean just above the first knuckle. Wounds cauterized like somebody held a hot knife to him. He was awake but wouldn't speak, wouldn't even cry. Just kept pointing up the holler toward Gurney's house with the 2 bloody stumps. State police came, sheriff came, men with dogs. They kicked in Gurney's door at dusk. I was on my mama's porch when they carried the first box out. A shoebox full of mason jars, each one holding a single finger floating in cloudy fluid. Dozens of them. More boxes followed. They lined the jars up on a porch rail like evidence at a yard sale. Names and dates written on masking tape stuck to the glass in neat capital letters. Some went back to the 50s. My daddy's name was on one, 1973, ring finger, left hand. He'd lost it in a roof bolter when he was 19 and always said the mine just kept it. Turns out they were wrong about that. Gurney never tried to run. They found him in his recliner in front of a console TV that hadn't worked since Reagan was president. He was smiling wide, teeth yellow and crooked, holding both bare hands up for the deputies to see. 10 fingers, all perfect, all moving independent like they were glad to be free. Skin still pink and new around the knuckles where they'd been stitched on. The gloves were folded neat on the coffee table, fingertips dark and crusty. They took him out in cuffs. He kept turning around to wave at the crowd that had gathered, using every one of those borrowed fingers. Tommy never came back home. His sister moved to Ohio not long after.
The jars disappeared into evidence lockers, the house got boarded up, and the county eventually condemned it. Kids still sneak in sometimes. They say if you go down in the root cellar, there's a wooden crate with fresh jars waiting, lids still warm, labels blank. I left Mud Lick when I was 17, joined the Army, tried to put distance between me and every memory of that place.